The Air Force will formally begin operations of a Space Command division today. The Defence Minister says the US-style Space Force, which will evolve from the command, is a necessity in the context of future warfare. Let's bring in James Brown. He's the CEO of the Space Industry Association. James, thanks for your time. Space Command into the Space Force. You've read the strategy behind it. Does it stack up?
Look, it does. The strategy's been a long time coming. Space Command has been a long time coming, but Defence is thinking about this the right way. They're also putting a lot of money in. So today, in that Defence Space strategy that's been publicly released, they've committed to spend $17 billion on defence space assets and capability between now and 2036. So they're building the command. They've said there might be a Space Force into the future. One of the key things they're trying to do...
Do you think there will be? Does it evolve into a force, which basically means the capability you refer to, doesn't it?
Well, it depends whether the people are there, and that's their biggest challenge at the moment. They're trying to find who is going to staff this Space Command at the moment. They need hundreds of people with engineering degrees, vocational education, who can get on the tools to make sure that space is safe. That'll be the first challenge. If they get that right, then we might end up with the Space Force, just like the US has. And you know, everybody laughed when that decision was made in the US. It's turned out to be very prescient. It's an important domain. It's a critical domain for Australia, and today's announcement is making sure that we know what Defence is doing to protect it.
I was talking to Gus McLaughlin earlier, former general, who says that the view among defence experts is that in a major conflict in the future, they talk about the Pearl Harbor incident happening in space in terms of the first operation of a major conflict.
Well, that's been a part of the military strategy for some of our potential adversaries or competitors for the last several decades. The US has had such a superiority in space, and its allies have enjoyed the benefits of access to that, of course, it's a major advantage that would have to be overcome in the early stage of any conflict. So the US for a long time has planned for its satellites to be interfered with by cyber attacks, by missile attacks, as we saw Russia practice last year when it shot down one of its own satellites. Now, of course, we're seeing new developments. China has been testing, openly testing this year, a satellite which can go around, grab your satellite, pull it out of the sky and send it down to burn up in Earth's atmosphere. So there's no shortage of threats, and people are actively rehearsing what war in space might look like at the moment.
And it's not just the military component, is it? Because an attack on satellites and so on affects everything from, well, military hardware to your iPhone.
That's right, and it's not even military threats. Solar flares can shut down satellites. We saw that happen with one of Elon Musk's launches last month. We're heading into a period where there's going to be more solar weather activity over the next few years. And anything that we have that relies on a synchronised network, phones, computers, power stations, weather forecasts, all of that comes from space. All of that has to be protected and is critical to Australia's national interests.
When you talk about dollars, the billions that will be spent as part of this space initiative, what sort of hardware are we talking about?
We're talking about Australia's new generation of military communication satellites so that our troops on the ground, our ships at sea and our planes in the air can talk to each other. We're talking about potentially electronic warfare defences from space, in space. We're talking about new intelligence satellites, reconnaissance satellites, things that can take pictures or observe activity around the world. And we're talking about really critical space domain awareness, radars, cameras, computer systems that help us take notice of the thousands of satellites whizzing around above Australia right now.
What's your read on the conflict in Ukraine in relation to this area? Because we've seen hacktivists, commercial enterprises going in to support the Ukrainians and, in a way, stopping the effectiveness of Russian cyber attacks, for example.
The open source data from space has been tremendously important in the early stages of the Ukraine conflict. We've seen it used by military forces, we've seen it used by everyday citizens to help military forces. It's becoming more of a factor, and we've seen...
Is this a new development that we've seen in this Ukraine conflict, that commercial and private individual contribution to an under-threat military?
Absolutely. We're seeing it happen in real time. And, you know, we are not that far away from the point in time where we need to think about what happens if criminal syndicates, drug networks have their own satellites that they want to launch into orbit. What might they be able to do with those? What could other non-state actors do with space infrastructure? There's a lot to think through here as this technology becomes reliable, prevalent and cheap.
And finally, for our industry, you spoke about the need for the right people to staff such a space force. Do you think it's achievable in the timeframe the government's talking about?
Yeah, it is. I mean, there'll be a lot of effort in the next 5 years. We're building an industry that can support defence. I took the Defence Space Commander to see some small companies in Sydney only a couple of weeks ago, and she was impressed by what she saw. So it's a steep learning curve, but we're working pretty fast to get up it.